Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford, and for the last few months, I have been commenting on my first reading of Lord of the Rings in many years, and certainly the first that I've done with a professional career in teaching Old Norse behind me. I guess it is behind me. Um, I want to say before talking about the movies that I am not just here to be the accuracy police about the Lord of the Rings movies. I don't like being the accuracy police about Old Norse stuff in movies either. Um, and I know that huge numbers of people work on any given movie, so no impugning of anybody's honor or anything. I know just how complex those things are. I've worked on several movies myself as a consultant, most prominently Frozen, if you can believe that. Um, so I don't pretend that it's a simple thing to make a movie and that one person makes a decision that's somehow easy or whatever. But I will talk about stuff that I noticed, either in contrast with the books or that had an Old English or Old Norse bearing to it. I took about a page of notes on each one of them. Actually, fewer as each one went, so more on the Fellowship than on the Two Towers than on the Return. I noted that a lot of things do get left out in the movies that are in the books, which surprises me a little bit since watching the movies actually takes longer than reading the books. But that's how it is. And we did watch the extended editions, so maybe that's part of it. But I seem to remember the theatrical editions are also pretty freaking long. I noticed that hobbits have tomatoes and potatoes, so I suppose they have engaged in trade with the Aztecs. That was a little bit surprising. And I don't know, throughout the entire movie series, I wondered about why on earth they decided to make uh, the pipeweed, which is obviously supposed to be tobacco in J.R.R. Tolkien's imagination, marijuana. Like, the way that people cut up when they're smoking it and all that. It's like, it's a little bit unbearable. Um, I thought Gandalf's big fireworks show was kind of wasted on a bunch of drunk dancing hobbits, but maybe you have to be a drunk dancing hobbit to appreciate fireworks as much as they seem to. Um, and let's see, Bilbo leaves alone in the movies in the Fellowship. I thought that was kind of surprising because it seems like a really dangerous road to take on your own without any dwarves with you like he has in the book. I thought they did a pretty good job in the movies of portraying the buildings in Mordor as ruins of Gondor's past. You can actually, if you're watching for that, having read the books, you can actually see a lot of traces that these are repurposed, Gondoric buildings. One of the funniest things I found was the fakey looking Elveny script for writing English that you see and everything. It's like extra stuff Elven. Um, all the A's with three dots above them and stuff like that. I didn't know what the purpose of that was. I mean, if you're going to take Vienna, take fucking Vienna, right? Why not just write it in actual Elvish if you're going to make the English weirdly hard to read? I wondered how much time every single hobbit spends every single day curling his hair, because it struck me as being, not like not the kind of curly hair one wakes up with, but it all looked pretty, sort of professionally done. So I was surprised like that. I wondered why the ring speaks like an Alexa, when I mean, obviously with a deeper, more evil voice, but when Gandalf and Frodo are talking about it at Frodo's table, it seems to be kind of talking to Frodo. Um, it is really hard to tell what the geography of the different mountain ranges that they pass is supposed to be, because one moment it looks like they have a mountain range they're almost about to get to, and then the next moment they're walking across a flat area. Very, very tough for me to picture what's meant to be uh, the geography there. I thought Christopher Lee was pretty obviously a J.R.R. Tolkien fan from the way he pronounces things, right? This is like Minas Tirith Sauron. You can tell that he's paying attention to Tolkien's own guides about these things, whereas a lot of other actors don't pay as much attention. Although Ian God, what's his name? I know so many Ian McSomethings. Ian McShane is from Deadwood. I helped him with his Old Norse lines and American Gods. Ian McCollum and I went to Finland. Ian McKellen. He also does a good job with the pronunciation. I wondered why Orthanc is so tall if Saruman only uses the base. Like, there's just a bunch of things in here that, like, when you're making a decision to turn this from a story told in words to a story told in pictures, a lot of decisions that don't necessarily seem quote unquote logical that you don't have to think about when you're just reading it as a book. I thought that it was weird that Pippin sounds Irish and none of the other hobbits do. I wondered why Merry and Pippin need to steal food, because Frodo and Sam meet them stealing food, but are they that poor? I don't know. Maybe that makes more sense in the book and I don't remember, but that's not how they meet them in the book. When they get to Bree, the guardsman says that they sound like they are, quote, out of the Shire by your talk, off quote, but they don't sound different from the people in Bree, other than Pippin, who sounds Irish. I thought it was funny that when they go to the bar in Bree, that the tough guys there like ferrets. I don't know a ton of, it's like, I don't know a ton of tough guys who love ferrets. I didn't know how the Ringwraiths knew what room to seek the hobbits in. But then Strider showed up, and I realized, I was thinking about, like, well, what role would I play if, there were going to be, like, there's a movie made locally that, like, I got to participate in, and I got to play, like, a role from Lord of the Rings in, and I realized I knew exactly who it was. It's one of the Ringwraiths, right? The horrid beings who kind of screech and wear hoods over their heads to conceal their faces. I thought that when they flashed through all the static images of the Ringwraiths just hanging out on the trail, and Aragorn says they'll never stop hunting you, that was kind of funny. Because they're not hunting them right then. Hobbits are thrown at hobbits rather than by them in this movie as they're leaving Bree. I thought that was a little bit of an odd shout out to the story in the book. There is apparently a Bill the Pony, because they call the pony Bill later, but he's not called that before they're dumping him off before they go into Moria. When the orcs are chopping down trees in Isengard, I always want to say Isengard, right, because I'm thinking about it in terms of older languages. I wonder what the lumberjack orcs think about all the orcs who are just standing around making jerky motions at them, right? Because there's a bunch of orcs that seem to stand around doing that all the time. Am I being excessively critical?
Anything positive?
I just said I acknowledge that it's very hard to make a movie.
Okay, that was the beginning.
They worked hard. I thought it was weird that Aragorn was carrying 4 extra swords. That's a weird, that's a lot of weight. It's a weird expedient to explain how they have swords when they didn't go into the grave mounds. I cannot tell what on earth Sauron is saying to Saruman through the Palantir to Frodo through the ring, although I thought I might have heard Ashnaz, which is like one ring, right, at one point. I didn't see the pack horse when they went to Weathertop, so it seems like a plot hole. I couldn't tell what Gandalf was saying to the Moth, but I thought I might have heard him say Gwaihir. They moved the Athelas or Kingsfoil scene from the Return of the King to the Fellowship of the Ring, which is fine. I guess it's kind of a minor scene in the Return of the King, but so that's probably okay pacing change. Because movies can only be about fighting, Arwen has to fight, even though that steals a lot of the specialness of Eowyn that she has in the book, I thought. And then again, as she's riding toward the mountains, one minute they're visible and the next minute they're not. It seems like I can't tell where they're supposed to be at. If Elrond knew that Isildur was going to cause so much trouble by not throwing the ring into the fire, why didn't he push Isildur into the fire? I don't know. Seems like one of those utilitarian questions. If you could push one Númenorian king of men into the fire to save 10 Númenorian kings of men, would you do it? When Boromir showed up, I was kind of surprised that he didn't say thee and thou and all that, because, he speaks so archaically in the book. Also, this blonde guy doesn't look as much like the black-haired Boromir of the movie. This of the book. This guy should be stealing the Declaration of Independence, or shooting at James Bond in a Russian impound lot or something. Doesn't really look like who I pictured. Asterisk. I had seen the movie, so I knew who I was supposed to picture, but it's not obviously who J.R.R. Tolkien is picturing. God, when Boromir is teaching the hobbits to sword fight and he has them parry with the cutting edge, right? You're gonna notch your blade 10 times from Sunday within a half-hour training session, right? He's no master of the blade. Although Boromir bonding with Merry and Pippin, that is good foreshadowing, so I'll give him that. Gandalf's staff has 2 taps for brighter. I disagree with his flashlight setting choice. I like my flashlights to come on their brightest setting first and then tap down to lower settings. So Gandalf is not quite the same flashlight bro that I am. I suppose that's about all that I wrote about the Fellowship. Those are most of my remarks. More to say about language stuff and whatever in the Two Towers and Return of the King, though, and I'll get to that after a quick message from my friends and partners at Grimfrost.
Maybe some of these people really love these books.
Well, I think a lot of people love the books, yeah, and the movies. I mean, look, more people seen the movies than have ever seen the books.
True.
So that's something, right? And they are magnificent cinematic achievements, right? If I weren't comparing them to the books, I would still say like, this is impressive, right? A lot of people worked really hard to make this look as good as it does. Sure. A lot of the acting is fantastic, right? Christopher Lee, Ian McKellen are great. John Rhys Davies is great, right? I mean, a lot of people are, they do a good job. Sam, I thought, his name, but he does a really good job, right? I think. Some of them are a little hard to separate from other roles they have. It's hard not to hear Elrond saying, Mr. Anderson, but, All right. Two Towers is a great opening with the panning over the mountains and Gandalf shouting at the Balrog, right? I remember seeing that in 2002 and thinking that's how all movies should start. Back when I was like arrogant enough to think that I'd have a biopic or something one day, I thought, oh man, I've got to start by panning over the mountains, right? But it's kind of ludicrous, the things you think about when you're, God, I was 17 when that movie came out or whatever. Honestly, the Gospels agree better with each other than these movies do with the books that they're hypothetically based on. That's not knocking the Gospels or the Lord of the Rings movies, but they are very different versions of a similar story, but not the same story. I did note on Grima's order banishing Éomer that the Rohirrim don't write the 3 dots on the A that everybody else seemed to, so I guess that's kind of a different thing. Their Sudden Who looking helmets, very good match to Old English physical culture. So, actually I thought that was nice. Maybe a little too much armor relative to something you would see in Anglo-Saxon England, but like the helmets in shape, yeah, spot on. Sure, it's what I'd expect. The insane A Hobbit lay here tracking over Bear Rock. I mean, but actually that kind of reminded me of like old John Wayne movies, the ways people would track in some of those old-fashioned westerns. A lot of the Rohirric actors do not speak Old English well, I will say. The guy who plays Éomer, the guy who plays Theoden, like they phone it in as far as checking the actual Old English pronunciation. A little bit of a little bit of a critical remark there, perhaps. Éomer says Eorod for Arod. Theoden says Eorlingas, not Eorlingas, right? But easy things to get wrong. And actually, as Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas running across the fields of Rohan tracking the hobbits, it occurred to me, definitely if I run a movie, like based on the Lord of the Rings or something, I of course I do know now, right? Having seen more of the movies, which character I would play would be Gollum, right? The creepy little, hunchback guy screaming and pointy teeth and Yeah. I am really impressed if the Frodo and Sam actors actually walked barefoot on all those rocks in the Emmenbuel scenes. Smeagol, when we learn his true name, of course, that's Smag. That's from this an old Germanic root there in the Old English verb smaelgan, to creep. And of course, the past tense of that in its Old Norse cognate would be, or Gothic cognate too, would be smaug, hence the name of the dragon. So actually, Smeagol and Smaug have similar meaning names. Creeper, essentially, something like that. I will praise again Gandalf, Ian McKellen, fighting the Balrog. He has this great, very poetic delivery of the monologue about fighting the Balrog. Smote his ruin upon the mountainside. Right? I mean, poetic in its delivery. Right? I mean, you can actually mark the poetic feat there. Right? And you get a nice cretic and then a dactyl and then two iambs. It's well done. Treebeard says to the hobbits, I think you'll enjoy this one too. It's one of my own compositions. Lies all poets tell ourselves. He also calls hobbits, quote, shirelings. So, people of the Shire. I think that's kind of an old English E sounding uh, word from the movie. I don't remember that in the book, although it might have been. Of course, Theoden being under the magical sway of Saruman is a completely movie thing, but it sort of works. Gandalf is surprised Sam is with Frodo. He met the other ones in the company. Did not tell him. Like there's just holes when things are not done exactly like the books, because Tolkien is such genius and insanity, fine perforated line, such a genius that he has all of this mapped out so well that like everything actually does tie together. It doesn't tie together quite as well in the movie. It occurs to me that it's sort of unobvious, both in the books and the movies, though, why exactly the hobbits have to go into Mordor, either through the Big Gate or through Cirith Ungol. Like, do I have to cross this just where it's lowest? Right? Colorado bros would just say, well, let's go over just take the peak way, right? You don't have to take the pass. But these are not Colorado bros, I suppose. Frodo and Sam, anyway. Merry and Pippin later, maybe. Lots of lines are moved around, right? Treebeard gets some of Bombadil's lines. Aragorn, or whoever it is who talks about Eowyn living trapped in a bower that's moved to Wormtongue. I was surprised at Grima saying Lothspell. Of course, Old English for bad news. I was surprised at that. And then in the extended editions, we have Eowyn singing that song in Old English, Bealaquem Soriende on Meduselde. I cut all those words like awful death, Bealaquem, sorrowing Soriende in Medusel, the mead hall. Um, I couldn't exactly place it, but I know those words are from Beowulf. Surely somebody online has found the exact passage, but I suppose David Salo is the linguistic consultant on the movies, right? He must have done that very deliberately. One thing Tolkien would never say, that Theoden says in the movie, is, quote, no parent should ever have to bury their child, off quote. Tolkien would not have used their as a singular possessive pronoun. Several times with the Rohirrim, we hear West through Hall, be well. That is both a greeting, a toast, and a farewell in Old English, so that's nice, and that's certainly realistic. And I caught a tiny snatch of Old English when Aragorn meets the horse Brego, whose name means Lord in Old English, and he says, I swear to God, although there wasn't captioned or anything, "Thine Name is Königlicht." Your name is kingly. So nice, very nice little Easter egg there for Old English people. We get our first Idim, which, those two words are used together 85 times in the books probably, but only Faramir one time in this movie says it. That was still fun. And of course, Faramir is so changed, but I'm sure 10,000 fanboys have written about that. I don't need to detail that too much more. Only Legolas may legally bear a bow in the movie. No one else may be an archer. Right? When they kill the first warg rider, they call it a scout, but the scout ambushes them when he was hidden from them. What kind of moron scout does that, right? Aren't scouts supposed to report back? I don't know. It just seemed like a little bit of a issue. everybody says that Gandalf fell in the book, and everybody says that Aragorn fell in the movie when they didn't die, but everybody thinks they died. So I guess they borrowed a device of Tolkien's, they just applied it in a different place. When Arwen is talking to Elrond, she calls him, I think, Ata. So is Ata dad in one of the Elven languages? That's borrowed from Gothic, which I know Tolkien and his son I've had a lot of affection for. Of course, Attila's little daddy. It's something the Huns called, or the Hunnish leader was called by his Gothic troops. Osgiliath, land of stairs. Right, it seems like that ruined city is mostly staircases. I didn't know where they were supposed to go. After Sam tells Frodo to use the ring to disappear, I got to thinking, pretty soon, of course, the movies, Eowyn is going to be going by the name Darren Helm, Hidden Helm, and I thought, in the Nibelungen lead, when Siegfried has it's called in Middle High German the cognate term, like the Darren Kappa or something, right? The hiding cape. I wonder if actually Tolkien's use of that name, Darren Helm, is a shout out to that. It probably is. What else? Oh, Gamling, instead of being a really old guy, is 30 or 40. I'm the worst guy in the world at telling people's ages, but right, he's not old. I do not know how they get orcs to die so readily for their cause. You think that you'd have to volunteer to be one of the battering ram guys who falls off the bridge. And their morale never actually seems that good to me. I thought there were a lot of kind of weird shout outs to the language of the war on terror from the early 2000s. I've been reading a biography of George W. Bush. Maybe that's on my mind a little bit more. But, like the reckless hate, like it's like the orcs hate us for our freedom kind of thing, which is weird because Hollywood people tended to hate that kind of politics. But it seems like they echo it all the time here, not to mention, Faramir pursuing enhanced interrogation on Gollum struck me as weirdly of its time, and like of the opposite perspective of its time. Anyway, another passage under Helm's Deep leads to the mountains. Aragorn then refers to that as a mountain pass. I did not recall that it specifically had to be a pass. Éomer calls his men Rohirrim, just like I call fellow Americans Bandariki men all the time. What? Why does he call people from his own country by a name other people give them? Gimli says the words nervous system, which strikes me as excessively modern. I also thought it was kind of weird that he sits on one of his dead opponents, right? It strikes me as kind of gruesome. Not something I assume a lot of people would do. Why are orcs standing on the dam when the Ents brink it? Strikes me as odd. Would have probably gotten out of there. And then finally, your sewer in Osgiliath dumps out on a hill uphill from it in a forest. Strikes me as strange placement. But then we have the nice song at the end by the Icelandic singer. All right, The Return of the King. What are my notes here? Deagle is happier to catch a fish at the beginning than I have seen people when their first child is born. Seems to me to be kind of an excessively jubilant reaction. I've been praising Christopher Lee's pronunciation, although he does say orthanc, not orthonc, which would be consistent with Old English. So let me shake my glasses at him. The Rohirrim drinking from mugs, not horns, strikes me as not quite Old Englishy. Hollywood makes everything fiery, right? Saruman shoots fire, the Palantir has to burn thing. Like it's, I got the impression that these were sort of quieter events, subtler events in the book. We have a much more sympathetic Gollum because Gollum, half of him says the other half of him. Smeagol did it once, referring to murder. In the book, Smeagol is a much more prolific murderer, so I guess we're supposed to sympathize with him a little bit more here. They return to Edoras to party, so it's kind of a less beset world, right? In the books, they're camping out, right? There's enemies still all around them. It seems like they defeat their enemies more like finally here. I understand from reading the appendices to the books that Theoden was actually raised in Gondor, and yet he seems really pissed at the idea of helping Gondor. Quote, what do we owe Gondor? Off quote. Not very much like the guy in the book. I wondered if Elrond owns Narsil, right? Why does he wait so long to reforge it? Is it protected by some national heritage arrangement or something? I don't know. In the book where it's reforged much earlier, it makes a little bit more sense. Minas Tirith looks great in the movie, right? I got a nice image of what I think Tolkien was talking about with the keel of the mountain that comes out and the different levels and the different gates. I thought that was actually super well done. Excellent imagery there, and lived up to the description of the book. I thought that was super. So 5 stars on that particular thing. Uh, Denethor is a much less interesting character in the movie. I think I talked about that quite a bit talking about the book, but it's just so much more sitcom level. His interactions with Gandalf and Faramir and Pippin, where he's a much more dignified and quiet character in the book, which I appreciated a little bit more. Surprised to see in the extended edition that scene, the headless statue with the crown of flowers and Aethelion. That was actually a nice touch. So Frodo and Sam might not be Colorado Bros, but Pippin is, because he does free climb up to that tower to light the torch, right? So that's, points to him. He probably kills it on Colorado Bumble. Um, that's I thought Denethor and Aragorn are supposed to look similar. They really don't. I did think though, the costumers, probably some of the most underpaid people in the history of cinema. I bet they got paid, one time or just while they were working on these movies. Those people deserve royalties for how many costumes there are, how good they look, how consistent they are among people who are supposed to be from the same place. Again, that's another 5-star thing. The costumes. I hope they got an Oscar for that. I don't know. I know this movie did get a lot of them. The problem with Gandalf using magic to save Faramir the first time is, why doesn't he ever use it to save anybody else? Um, Aemir says that mountain is evil, so he's not a Colorado bro. When Elrond and Aragorn exchange the words, I give hope to men, I keep none for myself, of course, it's something his mom says in the book, right? So that's a nice little shout out to a character that doesn't get any screen time. As much as Theoden is not like the Theoden of the book, he does say, we cannot beat the armies of Mordor. That doesn't matter. We're going to ride out to fight them. Okay, that does strike me as his attitude in the book, and very Old English or Old Norse attitude. He gets pretty Beowulf right there. I thought the pictographs on the doors of the dead looked like pictographs I'd seen in Scandinavia. I think they actually are an imitation of a specific uh, set of pictographs. They might be from somewhere else, but they struck me as something I'd seen there somewhere around Iceland. So that may be a deliberate shout out to something. I wondered where the Rohirrim keep their tent poles, because they seem to pitch tents a lot, and yet not to have huge tent poles on their horses. Sorry about all of the continuity sort of things, but it stands out. Um, Gimli, who sits on dead orcs, is squeamish about skulls. Also, wouldn't that rain of skulls that falls on them when they're in the walks of the dead, wouldn't that hurt them a lot? Gandalf uses some enhanced interrogation on Denethor, and then his orders to the Gondorian troops is, quote, prepare for battle. Duh, right? I think Gandalf in the book is a little bit more of a planner than that. Gandalf probably shouldn't twirl his stick so much when he's fighting. Gollum falls with a big no 2 times in this movie, which, one time seems like enough. Also, do spiders have stingers? I might have pointed that out in the book too, where I think that's also a bit of a continuity problem for me. No one has initiative at Gandalf, right? To the gate. Is nobody else noticing the weak point? I don't know. But that's common in movies, right? We always have. You can have 8 named characters who can have ideas. Everybody else is following those other guys. I was really, really surprised in the extended edition. You see how far Denethor runs on fire. Strikes me as a big challenge. It should be an Olympic event. The dead play a way bigger role in the Battle of Pelennor Fields here. I don't understand how Sting works, because apparently you can stick it into an orc and then pull it straight out and it will be clean. Mordor looks more populous than Gondor. Maybe it's supposed to be, but it still strikes me as weird the way the Minas Tirith of the movie is surrounded by just empty fields. What are they eating? There's all this emphasis on the necklace that just isn't there in the book. The cuts in Frodo's neck from the weight of the ring, that was a nice touch. I thought that was well done. I thought the voice of Sauron being this monstrous guy with the, the Tolkienian runes on his helmet, not as interesting as the subtler human of, Numenorian human of the book. I wondered how they all recognize Aragorn's authority already at the gates of Gondor, because like our gates of Moria, Mordor, because they don't know who he is yet. Not everybody has probably gotten the message, and probably not everybody believes him. When they get the mithril back from the voice of Sauron, why doesn't Gandalf wrap it around his neck for a little bit of extra protection, or put it on Pippin? I don't know. It struck me as something I would probably have made use of. Rocks bounce off Gollum's head. Do rocks bounce off my head? Will you throw a rock at my head?
No.
All right. You don't want to?
No, can I pass on that one?
How would you parry a sword twice as big as you? Referring to the fight between Aragorn and the troll at the Gate of Mordor. Wouldn't it be hot sitting on a bathtub-sized rock amid flowing lava? I just feel like probably the heat would suffocate you there, kill you, or just dehydrate you. I noticed there was a lot less hand-holding in the movie than in the book. Sam and Frodo are always holding hands. There's a little bit of it in the movie. I mean, I get why for 21st century audiences that it looks, it implies a different relationship between Frodo and Sam, and it's clear in the book. Because after all, Sam has to go back to Hobbiton and marry Sheryl Crow at the end. So, those are my remarks. Further remarks?
It was really long.
It was long. It was long. But again, what an achievement by the whole team. I mean, especially let me single out the costumers, David Salo for his work on the languages, and let me give a round of applause for the whoever put together all that mountain footage, right? Like at the beginning of the two towers and the scene of the beacons being lit between Gondor and Rohan. Fantastic. Well, I think my next video in this series is going to be about the appendices in Lord of the Rings. Then I'll start reading the Silmarillion at some point, trying not to glut the channel with Lord of the Rings content, but it's something that, it's a little bit different, a little bit of variety while I'm working on the prose edit a lot behind the scenes. And if you're into the prose edit and you want to see that translation faster, you can always join my Patreon at the new Scold tier, where you get a monthly live meeting with me where I'm going over the most recent part that I've translated, showing you the Old Norse, showing you what I've done with it, taking your questions, feedback, etc. So you'll be the first people in the world to see or hear any part of that. So check that out if you're interested. And for now, from beautiful Colorado, where Frodo and Sam would struggle to get over the hogback, but Pippin apparently wouldn't, I'm wishing you all the best.
So how did it feel to watch 12 hours of Lord of the Rings?
Oh my God, is that what it was?
I think so. Yeah, that was the extended editions.
It's a day and a half of work. Yeah, it was
really
a
long.
lot. It was a lot. I'm not a movie guy, really. With few exceptions. I do like Lawrence of Arabia, which is another really long movie. I like The Magnificent Seven, which is pretty long. But yeah, it feels long. Like you feel it, right? An intermission would have been nice, like David Lean would have put into one of his movies. I guess you can pause it, make your own intermission. The commercials were pretty loud. I guess it's our fault for being too cheap to
That's
pay for
my
it.
fault, is what he's saying. Mine. I liked the dresses.
Which ones in particular?
I mean, Arwen, Eowyn.
I did praise the costumers. Right, a lot of praise for the costumers.
Yeah.
Anything else you thought stood out as a positive? You're a lover of the books, right?
Really liked the dresses.